finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
All right, back again with another episode. We're super excited about this one. This is one of these things where you know that we are absolutely BS free because we are featuring another podcaster that we stumbled upon. I can't even remember how we
I know
did.
how it was. Dr. Robert Yoho got me linked into FitRx podcast with Dr. Greg Dennis, and I have been fangirling out on his show because there's so many great episodes on there on all kinds of anti-aging, health optimization, and I was blown away by the topics he's interested in that we are, such as NAD, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, hormone replacement, etc. So, on that note,
so it was really interesting because his journey was very similar to ours. I mean, he's probably, I don't know, but I would imagine close to 20 years younger than us. So he's in a different part of his career. Got burned out with corporate medicine, started to see through all the BS as far as the influences of insurance companies, big pharma, essentially just corporate medicine, which is all of these things, like the three-headed dog Cerberus guarding the gates of hell is kind of these multi-headed hydras that have become corporate anything. So at any rate, he started his own direct patient care practice
called Vibrant Life Direct Care,
where he is able to practice medicine the way he thinks is best for patients. And so he does lots of diet and exercise counseling, got himself certified as a trainer in CrossFit, has explored things that work that can't be patented, such as, NAD, which we will talk about again in another show. This stuff is mind-blowing. Hyperbaric oxygen, as we've discussed before, what diet works the best, what diets don't work as well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and really trying to empower patients to be their own best doctor, which I think is what medicine's supposed to be. So great guy. And it's interesting because, technically, I guess he's sort of a competitor because we're in the same world, but we really see it as we're all fighting with the same swords. And if we're going to try to, take down the Leviathan or cut the heads off Cerberus, we all have to work together. And so coming alongside somebody like Greg has been just awesome.
I would say competitor. I'd say there's plenty of
collaborator,
plenty of stuff to go around for all of us, right? So,
but I don't think he does episodes where he laughs and mocks and talks about glory holes and gets a little tipsy at the same time. But nonetheless, we all have our niche.
We all have our niche. Niche is the word. Get it right.
The riches are in the niches.
Yeah.
Bitches.
Not niches, eh? Oh, and I got to just give a shout out to our poor sponsor of this week that's got to put up with us, which is Michael L. Relvis, who is a CFP professional and insurance agent committed to helping physicians nationwide with their term life and disability insurance needs. Michael provides an objective, transparent, and education-focused process that aims to help physicians make prudent decisions and avoid overcomplicating things. He exclusively offers own occupation disability insurance policies for residents, fellows, and attending physicians. We really like Michael and know he's got your best interest at heart when it comes to disability insurance. We personally know he'd be happy to help you with whatever your needs are, and you can find him at www.mr-disability-insurance.com or contact him at 1-800-817-4522. All right, let's dive into the show because there's so many questions that I want to ask Dr. Greg Dennis.
All right, we're back with another episode. We are super stoked to have Dr. Greg Dennis with us. We found him through another doctor that we had interviewed and started listening to his podcast, and we were really excited because In the last 2 years, we realized how crazy the world, medicine, and regulators can be. And it was really a delight to find somebody of common belief and common mind who thinks a lot about the business of medicine, similar to us, what treatments people should be doing, how we should look at taking care of ourselves from diet, exercise, hormone therapy, et cetera, et cetera. So, Dr. Dennis, welcome to BS Free MD.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So why don't you tell everybody a little bit, just a bit about your background? I mean, you left the corporate medicine world and went into direct primary care, which is now becoming a bigger field, and have your practice there, which is a really interesting. I really like what you do. So before we get into your podcast and what you're doing there, share a little bit about your practice.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll try to be brief, but I was in the regular corporate medicine for many years, meaning I worked for a big company, and of course they just run people through like cattle. So by the time the nurses got done, I had, 5 minutes with a patient, and I had a panel of almost 4,000 people. And I practiced, what I would always tell my patients, evidence-based medicine. And when a patient questioned me about something, I would say, oh no, I practice evidence-based medicine. Don't question me. This is how it is. And so I did everything right. I did everything as I was trained, and, treating people's cholesterol and treating their diabetes and making everything look better on paper. And one day, I've always been into fitness and stuff myself, but, we are never trained to use that, as a doctor, to help patients. It was just something I did. And so, I did everything, I guess, more traditionally. And one day I just kind of had this epiphany, and I don't really know where it came from. And I just thought, my patients aren't getting any better. Yeah, they look better on paper. So their A1C is down, their cholesterol numbers are down, but they're still fat. They're still dying of heart disease and strokes, and they still have arthritis, and they're still miserable. And, and so I thought, what am I doing? Like there's gotta be a better way. And so I just kind of took a deep dive, and, this certainly wasn't an overnight thing. I mean, it was years of just, looking for a better way. And the more that I kept digging into that, the more I realized all of the inadequacies of our Western healthcare, or kind of traditional healthcare, and so that just kind of led me down a lot of paths, and I got certified in age management medicine, which is there's several groups out there that kind of do this anti-aging medicine. And I got into hormone optimization and different things. And so as I started getting into these things, and I started getting into nutrition and realizing that you can really heal a lot of things, most things probably by lifestyle and nutrition and fasting and different things. And so as I started realizing this, I became less and less of a fit in corporate medicine. And plus I really felt like I had some tools now to actually help people and reverse some disease rather than just throwing medication at them. And so, so I left corporate medicine, and my wife and I have a direct primary care clinic. And what that is, it's a model of care where we do not take insurance, and people pay a monthly membership fee. And it's almost like a gym membership. And so within that, we see a lot smaller amount of people, and we can see them as often as they want. And we really have a lot of time to take care of them. And then also in kind of my growth and evolution and learning all this stuff, I definitely lean more towards the wellness side. There's a lot of direct primary care clinics out there who still do just kind of more traditional primary care medicine. And, but we really focus more on the wellness side of it. And, again, focus on nutrition, weight loss, hormone optimization. And then we have since gotten into things like peptides, and we do a little bit of aesthetics and stuff like that. And so some sexual wellness, we do some platelet rich plasma and things like that. And then within all that, with me getting an interest in just kind of health and wellness and realizing all the inadequacies of traditional medicine, then I started this podcast a couple of years ago called Fit RX, where I get to just talk to people like you guys, who are like-minded, and just people across the country who are experts in nutrition and fitness and wellness and things like that.
So did a lot of your patients from your traditional practice follow you into your direct primary care practice, or did it cause a different sort of screening, as far as people are like, okay, well, this is more, there's a lot of lifestyle medicine involved with this. There's, hormone optimization. Did that sort of just like auto select a certain group of people that would be more into that?
It did. I certainly had some follow me. There's many that didn't, because people have what we call an insurance-based mindset, and they feel like that if insurance doesn't cover it, they can't do it. And so since we don't take insurance, then that they would just, no matter how much they like me as a doctor, as a person, they just say, well, I can't do that because I have this insurance. And so people are stuck in this mindset that,
I know, it boggles my mind too.
Yeah.
Even where we practice, I would suggest something like, okay, you can take this for your back pain, but I think you should have some massage therapy and, maybe see your favorite chiropractor because it's going to work better. Well, I can't because insurance won't pay for it. I'm like, it boggles me about healthcare, because anywhere else in our lives, you wouldn't do that. I don't think, but
you mean my insurance won't pay for the rebuilding of my old cars?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, it's completely nuts. I'm interested if you had any of the patients that were, that had the traditional, illnesses, chronic illnesses of the 20th, 21st century, hypertension, diabetics, et cetera, that came into your new model where they're like, holy cow, I never knew I could feel this good. I just needed to, figure out how to eat properly, and I needed to go for a walk, and I needed to maybe have a testosterone above 105. And,
right.
Do you have any of those cases?
Absolutely. And, we get people in, and this was one of the things I discovered kind of in my, search, when I started just kind of realizing, again, a lot of the inadequacies is we can reverse type 2 diabetes in many cases. And I was never taught that. I don't know if you guys were ever taught that, but I was never taught that in medicine. And I went to a great residency, had great faculty, but not once did anybody tell me to, hey, talk about their diet and, get them to do, X, Y, and Z and try to get them off some of these medicines, never. Wow. And so when I learned that I could reverse diabetes, we're talking, of course, type 2 diabetes. And I share this with patients that, hey, you can possibly reverse this. And, they look at me like, well, nobody's ever told me that. And I'm like, I know, I'm a doctor. Nobody ever told me that either, but you can, I've done it. I always share, excuse me, one of my trophy stories of this guy who had an A1C of 14.5. And he was, very resistant to going on medication. And normally, I'm sure you guys know most doctors, and several years ago, I would have done this. I mean, I would have thrown the kitchen sink at him. I would have thrown him on insulin, several oral medications, the whole bit. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I mean, I went through the whole bit about, what causes a rise in insulin and, eating a higher fat type of a diet and, high fat, low carb and some intermittent fasting and starting to exercise and, blah, blah, blah. I went through the whole thing and he bought it all. And he's like, all right, I'm going to do it. And so I told him, to come in 3 months. And he came in 4. When he came in 4 months, we repeated his lab. His A1C was 4.5.
Wow.
Insulin level was normal. C-peptide levels normal. Blood sugar normal. Like everything was normal.
Wow.
And I said, okay, you're good. You're cured, but nobody ever taught me that. And so when people come in and I share this with them, like, hey, if you do this and you're a little bit disciplined, like you can get off some of these medications, and they've never been told that. I mean, they, of course, as doctors, we're just taught to just give them this medication. When that doesn't work, give them another medication, then give them another medication. And then you got to give them, a fifth medication to counteract the side effect of those medications.
Yeah.
And so they're, they're very excited. And that's really a lot of our referrals is just word of mouth, because they'll say, hey, go see these guys because they really do things differently, and they'll try to get you off medications rather than just throwing more medications on you.
So in that situation, because here's the thing, right? This is what I see. I see a lot, which is physicians are like, well, yeah, people aren't going to lose weight, so we have to give them, Byetta, and we have to give them metformin, and all these expensive, metformin's not expensive, but a lot of these new MABs for diabetes are just like, holy crap. And then you look at the evidence and you go, it might change your A1C, but there's zero evidence that it changes mortality. And you're like, wow, that's a stretch. So they go, well, yeah, people won't lose weight, or if they do, they'll gain it back. But the other side of that is when you don't give somebody the tools and you don't say, this is exactly how you're supposed to eat. I mean, you're supposed to eat X number of calories based on these macro ratios with this amount of fasting, with this amount, this many miles or hours of walking versus resistance training. I mean, none of this stuff is hard. Like, it's really, it's hard to implement, but
some of it's hard. I mean,
but it's
changing your life, changing your diet, new habits for the patient. I'd say it's hard. I mean, look, we're training. We've got a trainer. We're working on stuff. Of course, it doesn't mean it's not.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you actually know how it works,
gotcha.
To be able to outline exactly for a patient how this works is not that difficult. I mean, it really isn't. I mean, with technology today and the apps to be able to track what you eat and to count calories and count macros and weigh your food, all these things seem egregiously hard, but they're really not that difficult. I mean, obviously being a little bit hungry is a challenge. Exercising when you've never exercised is a challenge. I get that.
Right.
But at the same time, when you tell people to lose weight and you never give them a system of how to do it, of course it's not going to work.
You're right. And, I hear a lot of doctors will say, well, they're not going to stick with a particular diet, and so I'm just going to go ahead and give them medication. And I hate that, because if we use that as first line as far as lifestyle and diet and exercise, and just said, look, this is what you need to do, and the doctors, led by example and reiterated that instead of just automatically, giving medication, I think that would go a long way, with the patients. And I think education, to your point of, and I draw out a little graph every time I see these people of what, I talk about insulin level a lot. And, you mentioned that, they're, people, even though we're treating their blood sugar, we're not improving mortality. And I've had, Dr. Ben Bickman on my podcast. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he, does a lot of metabolic research, and he really nails it, because he says that we have completely missed the boat, because we look at, and of course we're talking about type 2 diabetes. We look at type 2 diabetes as a blood sugar problem. It's not a blood sugar problem. It's an insulin problem. And he said, so we treat the blood sugar, do nothing for the insulin. And so he said, these people are going to the grave with great glycemic control, because we do nothing for the insulin levels. And the high insulin levels are what causes, all the heart disease and the arthritis and all the chronic illnesses. And then to make matters worse, we treat them with insulin. And so he said, when you treat now sometimes we just, we don't have any other choice, but, I love it. I love his statement. He says, when we treat a type 2 diabetic with insulin, it's like treating an alcoholic with a glass of wine. And so I love that. So we completely missed the boat on many things. We're just talking about diabetes, but, conventional medicine, they've just missed the mark on so many things. And the more that I get into this and read and learn, I just shake my head and I'm like,
It's
gosh.
it's horrible, and I would, I always feel like I'm dating myself, but I go back in the day, like how we were trained was, of course, allopathically. There's medication, but I remember there was much more emphasis for us on lifestyle modifications. That send them to the dietitian, exercise, stress, all those things, go through that, and we had time back then too. And so, not to totally rag out on people practicing corporate medicine now, but with metrics, with the time crunch, with how the system's set up, all of that, it is difficult to sit and educate your patients about that, even if you're a doc who has interest and knows a lot about diet and exercise modifications and those type of things. So there's that barrier, the time crunch barrier, and it becomes an easy to just throw some pills some way, and people want a fast fix in America, so it just happens. And then there's the drug companies pushing for that, which is a whole other thing. And so it'd be you're just doing all the wrong things. The fast fix isn't the right way
in the treadmill, it works perfect for the doctor, for the healthcare system you work for, and for the pharmaceutical industry, because you see a patient every 10 minutes. So the more patients you can see, the more RVUs you generate and the more money you make. So you're happy if you can give somebody a pill and make them go away. And then, the drug company's happy because you just sent them out with a prescription, and the system you work for is happy because you just generated more income for them. So everyone's happy except the patient, but the patient doesn't know because you've essentially made the patient a drug addict, because they have to take this stuff or else their crappy A1C is even crappier than it was before. I mean, it really likens to the rebuke that Jesus gave to the Pharisees, whereas, you clean the outside of the dish and you teach them, and then they come back and they're 10 times the sons of hell that they were before. And there's so much of that we do. I mean, we'd send people into the diabetic educator, and the diabetic educator has just had a 3-course meal provided by the insulin providing pharmacy rep. And so what's the solution? The solution is carbohydrate exchanges. So you have the patient focusing on carbohydrates when they should be eating virtually zero carbohydrates.
Absolutely.
And then the way you fix their carbohydrate exchanges is by ramming in way more insulin. And I mean, I had these arguments with dietitians all the time. I said, no, they should be eating essentially zero carbs. They shouldn't even be thinking about that. They should be focusing on fat and protein and not focusing on carbohydrates. And you should be decreasing their insulin, not fixing their hangover with half a bottle of Jack Daniels. And they looked at me like I had 9 heads. And I'm like, no, this is crazy what you're doing. They don't have normal metabolism. They can't be on a 60% carbohydrate diet. They're not running 12 miles a day.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And unfortunately, I don't see it changing because there's so much influence from big pharma, as I'm sure Dr. Yoho laid out, a lot better than I could. But I mean, there's just so much influence from big pharma on the governing organizations, the American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, and even our medical journals that we read that, I used to think were gospel. And now I don't trust any of them anymore. But unfortunately, if it does change, it's going to be very slow. But I really don't think it will, because none of those people make money if everybody's well. And if we're preaching wellness medicine, nobody makes money.
That's totally the truth. It's kind of gross in a way. I mean, I just
It
think
is.
of rates of obesity, and we got these kids now. I mean, when I was a kid, I don't even remember there ever being fat kids. There was like one fat kid in
but you grew up in northern Manitoba, and they were all being chased by polar bears. They were scared absolutely shitless that they were going to be eaten. So, there was that.
But it's totally changed. And now it's sad. You see all these kids, teenagers, young 20-somethings. I mean, it's hard to find someone that's in a normal BMI.
Well, the kids that are the normal BMI are wrestlers and track athletes. I mean, that's it. I mean, it's really bizarre. So after we dissed the whole kind of insulin / metabolic syndrome thing, which blows my mind for our non-medical listeners, you have to remember, and for our doctor listeners too, insulin is essentially fat growth hormone. I mean, people don't understand this. It's that like you need insulin, but we have this really kind of binary look at insulin. You know, insulin drops blood sugar high, insulin good. Yeah, but it does all these other storage issues. And you know, once you get these people on these massive doses of insulin, whether it's just once a day or multiple doses a day, they're never going to lose weight at that point. At least they're never going to lose fat. I mean, I don't know that it's possible. And so that whole insulin resistance and making it worse with no insulin makes no sense. So let's segue into what does make sense. We've seen from your podcast that you've interviewed lots of different experts in the diet world.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing makes me more angry than seeing on social media the secret to weight loss. Okay, I hate that. But is there a secret? Is there a diet that you've found with your patients, especially people that have these metabolic illnesses, that seems to be easier to adhere to, works better, works quicker?
Yeah. So obviously a lot of, kind of diets out there. And certainly I don't know that there's one diet that everybody should adhere to. It's very individualized, I would think. Since we've been on the topic of diabetes, certainly diabetics, just as you alluded to, they need to be eating a high fat, almost no carb diet, because this is what I draw out for them. And I show them what a carbohydrate does to insulin, kind of get a big spike, what protein does, you get a little spike. And then when you eat fat, you get no spike. So you get no insulin. So, I'll say based on this graph, almost all of your calories should come from fat and protein. Can you also hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect.
We're good.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. You kind of froze. And so, which is more of a keto type of a diet. I mean, people will recognize the keto. What I like about keto is it's kind of very trendy right now. And there's a lot of resources on keto, and there's keto recipes. And I mean, they don't have a problem finding, stuff about keto. So that's what I like about it. And especially for diabetics, that's a great way to eat, because you want a very high fat and protein and a very low carb. So if you're a diabetic where you have insulin resistance and I'm trying to get insulin levels down, certainly I'm going to lean more towards a ketogenic type of a diet. Now there's other things that you have to talk about, like trying to build muscle. Muscle is a very metabolically active tissue. And so, we have those talks, but, we can get into that later. But as far as nutrition goes, that's going to be a diabetic, more insulin resistant type of a patient. If, I'm dealing with an autoimmune type patient, you may have to clean up their diet a little bit more. What I've found clinically is, the carnivore diet, which sounds very extreme. Carnivore is just, straight animal products. But I have never seen anything make such radical changes as something like a carnivore diet. There are some people out there who just can't tolerate certain plants, and I can tolerate, like if I eat broccoli, I do fine. But these autoimmune people have a lot of sensitivities. Now, I'm not saying every autoimmune person has to be on a carnivore diet, but if they want to be on, if they want to just make sure they're not eating anything that is going to cause a flare in their disease. I mean, I've seen people just do fantastic on a carnivore diet and completely reverse autoimmune symptoms. It is very restrictive. And so there's only going to be certain people that do that. And I will also say that, this notion that we need so many servings of fruits and vegetables is, completely wrong. So those that want to do a carnivore diet and just eat meat only, I say fantastic. And I help them with that. And so I have a lot of those conversations, and people who are healthy and who are working out a lot, like myself. I mean, I can tolerate some carbohydrates, so I don't necessarily need to have less than 50 or 20 grams of carbohydrates a day. Now, I'm still pretty low carb compared to most people. But I have built up enough muscle to where I'm pretty metabolically active. And so then we talk about good carbs and clean calories. And, I talk about just eating foods with one ingredient to stay away from the processed stuff and staying away from the vegetable oils. And I try to get people over their fear of saturated fats. I have this conversation every day because I'm always, when we go over labs, I'm always trying to raise HDL cholesterol. And one of the ways to do that is to eat saturated fats. And so, eat the eggs and the, fatty cuts of meat and fatty fish and, butter. I tell people cook with real butter and ghee and lard and, that kind of stuff. And so, those are a lot of the conversations I have, as it pertains to diet on a day-to-day basis.
So now I've got a whole bunch of questions that jumped into my head, but
Okay.
this is gonna be fun. So, I know you've had, so as far as the anti-inflammatory diet, let's talk about that a little bit to segue.
Okay.
Because the new trend, I've seen all kinds of things posted in the plant-based diet is really big, not vegan necessarily, but plant-based everything. And I've seen a bunch of actually rheumatologists post about how it's important to follow plant-based diet, patients talking about, not just clean eating, but avoiding foods, which to me is more of the processed sugars and so forth, but clean eating and avoiding meat, proteins, because those can trigger inflammation. So there's so much out there, like, other than hearing anecdotal evidence from someone like, I forget his name, the orthopedic surgeon that wrote the Carnivore Diet book, because his experience was really positive. I mean, that's his experience. But how do you discern between, is it what seems to be the evidence in this wild smattering of stuff?
Boy, that's a great question. And it's hard. It's hard for us as physicians. And so let alone it's hard for patients who are out there trying to get advice, because you hear something, somebody, a doctor that's pushing, a vegan type diet. And there's documentaries on Netflix that are, you watch it. I've watched some of them, and and they're very, I'm having a brain fart here, but they make think, oh, okay. That sounds good. And then you hear the other side and you think, oh, okay, well, that sounds good. And they have studies to back it up. And, the vegan people, kind of have studies. And so it makes it very difficult. I would say most of all of the nutritional studies that we have are not very good. They're epidemiological studies. There's so many variables involved. The studies that talked about red meat causing cancer. Well, those people were also eating more French fries from McDonald's, and they tend to be more of them were smokers, and they're also getting the Dr. Peppers with the Big Macs. And so, yes, they're eating more red meat, but they're also eating all this other stuff. And so how do you sort through all that? That's a great question. All I can go on, I guess, is my own clinical experience and what I've seen. I believe personally that we, just eating mostly plants does not seem like a natural diet from an evolutionary standpoint to me. And many plants, have some toxins in them, because when you listen to some of these people who have researched this, plants don't have legs, so they can't run away from predators. So from an evolutionary standpoint, they've developed, these toxins because they don't want to be eaten. And so, it doesn't affect everybody. Again, I can eat plants and be fine. But there are some people, especially those with autoimmune disease, who are very sensitive to those. And so, I also think people eating more plants, they're missing out on a lot of micronutrients, and macronutrients.
Right.
And so, I study a lot about just, muscle and sarcopenia. And I feel like we need a lot of extra protein, and we need to maintain muscle as we get older, which is one of the, is a big risk factor in a lot of chronic diseases, is just sarcopenia and losing muscle. And so to maintain that, we need the protein, and we get the protein from, meats.
Right.
And so I just feel like that and this is what I do personally, is I get the majority of my calories from meat or eggs. I'm not a strict carnivore, but everything else is just kind of accessory. And I don't feel like we have to have 4 to 6 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. Matter of fact, I rarely eat fruits. I don't eat that many vegetables.
That would be Tim too. He hates fruit.
No,
And I'm
I
very,
think
and I'm very
I think
healthy.
I'm having a man crush.
Oh, jeez.
My markers are great, and I eat a lot of fat. I eat a lot of meat. My New Year's resolution, we're several months past New Year's now, but my New Year's resolutions was to eat more organ meats. And so now I'm eating, I'm not necessarily condoning this, but I'm eating some raw liver. I don't like the taste of liver, so I just swallow it raw, but you have to know where your cow comes from. Last weekend I smoked a heart, and it turned out really good. So I'm trying to eat more organ meats because I think it's good for you. That's really the only reason I'm doing it. And so I just believe that we should focus more on a meat-based diet. And if you want to eat a few vegetables, if you do fine with them, if you don't have autoimmune stuff and you do fine, and you want to eat some seasonal fruits and you can tolerate that, you're not a diabetic, okay, that's fine.
So I was going to just say though,
I got to say something first.
Okay,
I'm sorry, sweetie. I'm sorry. I just had this flash of a this is the randomness of my thinking, but I'm imagining now you, Joe Rogan, Cameron Hanes, and Ted Nugent sitting in a freezing cold pool of water, passing around a fresh elk heart and each taking a bite out of it with like blood dripping down your chest into this 38-degree water. And you're just like, ugh.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay. That was just my little randomness.
Yeah. I would be game for that. So, yeah.
So I'm thinking what you said totally makes sense, because to me, I thought of that too, because there's so many different diets, especially, people have trouble with plants. I know that people get on these FODMAP restrictive diets because there's a lot of nightshades or foods that set them off, whether for me, it's certain things set off my migraines. And then there's the whole realm of doing, testing the gut microbiome and doing food allergy testing. And I'm curious to know if you actually do that in any of your patient panels, actually do like it's like, I've had it done. I forget the name of it, where you actually do the markers to see what inflammatory reactions people are having to foods. Because I think that's very individual. And so
certainly, yeah,
to lump everybody and say, you can't eat, you shouldn't eat any meat at all because it's anti-inflammatory or it's just all carnivore. I think there's so many health conditions that overlap. What about the where was I going with this? I was wondering if you actually ever sort of did that, used any lab testing to check allergies to certain food groups and directed people's diet that way.
Yeah, I do it some. I don't do it a lot. And it's usually only at their request. And I guess the reason is I feel like that we can get that information on our own if the patient is willing to do that. And I'll use, gluten as an example. I don't like the celiac test because, people, if they're negative, people say, okay, then I can eat gluten, but yet gluten tears them up. And so,
right.
Obviously they have a sensitivity there. And so I would just rather them do their own experiment and do kind of a detox type of a diet. I actually like the Whole30, which, cuts out, now there's still fruits and vegetables and stuff in there, but it cuts out a lot of the foods that they could be reacting to, like, dairy and certainly wheat and any processed foods. And, that's a 30-day diet. And so if I can get people to do something like that, and then once they've kind of cleaned their system out, and most everybody will feel better on a diet like that. And then they add one thing at a time. And then if they add back dairy, or if they add back, gluten, or, whatever, and then they have problems with it, then they say, okay, well, I can't eat that, despite what a test says or a lab says. So that's my preference, but we do some of that usually, again, when the patient requests it.
I think you're right. My experience too is that people, if they start to get in tune with their body, they cut out the crappy foods and they start cooking with whole foods and cooking their own food and using you're right, single ingredient stuff as much as they can.
Yeah.
They're going to get to know what they feel better on and what they feel worse on. And I think that starts to reveal itself pretty quickly, which then makes me think of something I heard on another podcast and some blog posts recently about eating targeted towards your heritage, whatever your ancestral heritage is, because that's kind of your genetic makeup. So if your family's from, if you're Eskimos, you can eat the higher fat protein diet. If you're more from like India, you might want more plants based diet versus someone from Ireland type of thing. What do you know much about that, or any thoughts?
In Ireland, it's just whiskey.
You just want
There you
pierogies.
It's whiskey and potatoes. I'm like,
yeah. I've heard of that. I'll be real honest. I'm not an expert on that. Don't know much about it. It makes sense to me. And that goes back to, I guess, kind of, everything's individualized. I live in Oklahoma. I live in the Midwest. So most people here, don't have a problem eating meat, so when I recommend more meat, most people do fine with that. But, if somebody were to come to me from, they're eating, mostly plants and they feel great and their labs look great, then, I'm not going to tell them, hey, you need to stop eating plants and start eating more meat. Now I can't say that I've ever seen that. I find that most vegetarians are just not all that healthy, but if I were to see somebody like that, I certainly wouldn't change what they're doing.
Yeah, they're definitely the guy that you would pick a fight with in a bar first.
I think it's really hard to get enough protein
to maintain muscle mass
that you can eat every day. Yes,
every single person I know and that's not necessarily that many people, but that either switch to like a strict vegetarian or vegan diet, they're just emaciated looking. Like, you can have, you can be really strong and still have a very low body fat, which if you look at longevity studies appears to be one of the secret sauces. You want to have, you want to have as much lean body mass as you can, high lean body mass, with, is a huge deal, especially as you age, because as you age and you start blowing through muscle, those are the people that fall down and break hips. Those are the people that get worse osteoporosis. Those are the people that can't, functionality goes through the floor as far as walking and, all of these measures of sort of well-being and health, just go away. And so when you look at it from that perspective, like I used to run because I'm naturally kind of built like a fire hydrant, like just a brick. Like that's my natural, mesomorphic, endomorphic body. So when I was running marathons, I had to be really hungry and I had to do a ton of exercise and go to bed hungry every night to get my weight down to a point where I could, run as fast as I wanted. So I did that. I'm not going to do that anymore. Now I've really switched to, I want to be as strong as I possibly can going into my 60s now. Because I think that is what's going to allow me to do the activities that I like, skiing, water skiing, etc., plus preserve myself and keep me as free from injury, because I never got injured till I was in my mid 40s. And that was a complete life-changing experience. Once I started getting knee injuries, it was like, oh man, now the stuff that I normally do for weight control, I can't do anymore. And it was really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's all good. And I agree with you. If we maintain muscle, which you need protein to do that, we are going to alleviate or prevent, I would say, most chronic diseases. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And it's amazing how people, I think, really underestimate the amount. I know for me, I'm like, I like meat. I eat lots of protein. And now that we're actually tracking our macros, I'm blown away at how little I was eating and what it really takes. So
no,
I think that's something.
It's amazing. Like if you're gonna, my trainer just put me up to 45% protein and 2,000 calories a day. So that's essentially 200 grams of protein a day.
Wow.
You gotta try. Like that actually takes focused effort. Big pieces of codfish, a couple supplements, shakes or whatever. It's possible.
But I can't imagine doing it with just plants. I mean, that would be a heck of a lot of beans.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, that's a lot of fiber and beans.
Well, you
And
can't do it. That's the point. Is that
that's right.
it's so unbelievably nauseating to try to eat that many, beans and spinach and whatever else it takes that you just stop eating. And then what happens? Then your muscle mass goes through the floor. You might be cardiovascularly very fit. You might be able to run really fast, but you're not very strong. And I'd lived in that world. I know. I mean, it's, for me, it was easy because as I started lifting weights, I just gained weight back. I mean, that was never really a challenge for me. But boy, for some of these people, it's just like they're naturally thin anyways. And I'm just like, my God, you look like you have cancer.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I love beef is because you get a lot of bang for your buck as far as, protein is concerned and a lot of other nutrients as well. But, if I eat a good piece of meat or good steak and sometimes I track my, macronutrients as well. And I'm like, man, I just got 50 grams of protein, and and I think unfortunately people are scared of especially red meat and they're, and they go see their cardiologist or whoever and they say, limit red meat. I just think that's the completely opposite advice that they should be getting. Red meat is good for you and it's,
well, they're hearing that it increases your cholesterol, increases your
right.
bad fat, clogs your arteries, increases heart disease.
No, it's not.
And it's pro-inflammatory.
But it's the mound of French fries in that steak free.
That's right.
And the 3 Cokes and the Jack and like the 5 Jack Daniels we had after that screws all that up. I mean, that's the problem.
It's really
not
sugar in our diet everywhere is really
so
the biggest
and then
culprit.
it's hidden sugar. There's all the hidden sugars that are in that are in food. I like beef jerky is fantastic for protein
for the dentist.
It's it's so concentrated, but then you look at it and you go, wow, there's still actually a fair bit of sugar in there because to make dried beef palatable, they add all this other stuff, and so it's really pretty amazing out there.
Yeah. I saw a picture on it came across on Facebook and of course I'm on, all these groups and I study this stuff so I get these things, but it had a picture of 3 doctors who were carnivores. One of them was Dr. Sean Baker, who you alluded to, the orthopedic surgeon who's been a carnivore for a long time, Dr. Paul Saladino, and then I believe the third one was a dentist and I can't remember his name. And then so they contrasted these 3 doctors, and then there were 3 doctors who were vegans or vegetarians, and they looked at their pictures. And of course, these vegans were, as you mentioned, they were just real emaciated looking, kind of fleshy, thin. And then Paul Saladino, Sean Baker, and then this other guy were jacked. I mean, they were muscular. They had 6 packs, and anyway, it was a great picture of
That's awesome.
Vegan versus, they were all doctors of versus carnivore. So anyway, it was, I should have saved it, took a screenshot of it or something.
Yeah, no kidding.
No, I'd love that. I'd love to share that.
Sure
and it's just like,
find it
and ladies, which would you choose?
Well, everybody prefers something different, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and what's sad is people think that they're doing good, and they're not. They're just being misled. And, the doctors that are telling them to eat less meat and more vegetables, I mean, they're not bad people. They're just kind of misled, and people think that, oh, I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to eat less meat and more vegetables. And I mean, and sometimes that's good if you just cut out processed foods and you stop drinking the Dr. Peppers and the French fries, and if you want to eat more vegetables, then that's causing you to cut out all these other things. Well, great. You're going to get some health benefits from that. But is that the optimal, diet? I mean, and I would argue probably not, but at least you're moving in the right direction. So
do you ever, do you counsel all your patients on dietary things yourself, or do you use any local dietitians that partner with you that you trust, or
no, just me.
Yep.
That's the beauty of our practice is we have a lot of time. We're not limited to 5 minutes like I was before. And so because this is a membership based model, I mean, we have an hour with a new patient. And so I have plenty of time to kind of go through this, and they can follow up as often as they want to. And so they can come in. This was kind of cool. I had a a patient just the other day. I was talking about how she needed to build some muscle and work out and all this stuff. And she said, I don't even know what to do. I don't know where to start. Like nobody's ever taught me that. And she was she had a few dumbbells. She was wanting to work out in her house. And I said, okay, bring some dumbbells up to the clinic, make an appointment. And I said, I'm going to take you through a workout at your appointment. I'm going to write everything down. And so as you go through the motions, you'll remember it. And so we did that. That was an appointment. And so I wrote everything out on a piece of paper, and we're literally in the exam room, like, and she's doing, shoulder press and bench press and some squats, holding these dumbbells, and they were real light dumbbells, but she had some heavier at home. And I said, well, now you know the motions, you know what to do. But it got me thinking. I thought, my gosh, this is really cool that I can do this kind of thing. I could never have done that back when I was in corporate medicine and like actually taking somebody through a workout during an appointment. So
I know it's hard enough when I try to talk to somebody about back pain, just which exercises to do for the first few days to alleviate it. And then in the next 2 weeks, I'm like, I don't even have time to go through this, and it should be something I can do. So it's really pretty cool that you can do that in your practice.
But the thing is, I think it's worse. I think it's worse than you just didn't have time to do it. If you tried to do that, you'd get in trouble because there would be no code for that.
Well,
I guess you would have to code it as, 20 minutes of counseling on whatever. But, like I got into it with some of our administrators. I'm sure you can never imagine that I would ever get into any kind of confrontations with administration. And I said, look, like, why aren't we doing group visits? Like, why aren't we bringing in experts? You can have a couple of us as family doctors that are into fitness or whatever, and we can bring people in like guest speakers. It'll be way cheaper. We get 50 people in a room and we do it as a visit. Everybody no, we can't bill for it, so we can't do it. And I'm like,
it's pathetically sad.
No, but I mean, like, it really was crazy. And you just sit there and you go, we own the profession as physicians. Like, we're the ones that gave up our young adulthood to be trained to do this. We're the ones that have our license and our integrity on the line when we see patients. But somehow we've been trained in a way to be just cowards, and it drives me crazy. It's like, there is another way to do this. You're the doctor. You're not going to get sued for teaching a patient how to lift weights. I mean, like, come on.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I don't know, when that started, when doctors kind of lost the control of everything, but it's absolutely ran by administrators now, or at least in corporate medicine. That was my experience. And so, and if you do say something, and this, this is what we experienced. Again, my wife is a family practice doctor, and she worked part-time in the same system. And if you do say something like what you're referring to, and you say, hey, why don't we do this, or why don't we do that? She got told once that she was not, I won't say the name of the organization, but, she was not blank material, just, because you're kind of going against the grain. So if you don't follow along with their thought process, then, they don't want you.
Yeah, we know all about that.
Yeah, we know about it. Intimate. That's a different podcast.
Yeah. I got to jump back a little bit to the diabetics and the keto thing, because that's really a hot topic, and a lot of people are into keto and questions. But do you ever run into any pushback from patients who are diabetic and concerns about doing keto diet because of, they've been taught not to have ketones in their urine, so they get worried about that, or kidney issues with high protein diet and, watching their protein levels and their renal function? So what's your experience with that?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, and that just comes back to educating them. And it's not so much that I get asked that every now and then, but it's probably more the fat, because we're so, they get so inundated with fat is bad, and fat's going to give you heart disease and, this, that, and the other. And so, that's the biggest thing, but it's just educating them and giving them some material to look at. And I'm like, look, if you don't believe me, here's some books to read, so it depends on how deep of a dive they want to take in it. And the other challenge is, if they are a heart patient or a kidney patient or whatever, and then they go see their cardiologist, and their cardiologist is saying, well, you need to stay away from fats. You need a high carb, low fat diet, which I can't believe people are still, recommending that, but they are, and you need to eat a low fat diet, and you need to take this cholesterol medicine, and your cholesterol's high, and blah 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 blah. And then they come back to me, and I'm giving them a different message. That can be difficult as well, and so I feel sorry for the patient because they're getting conflicting stuff and from their doctors, and I just tell them, look, you got to choose which way to go, and do your own research. I tell patients all the time, don't take my word for it. Do your own research, come to your own conclusion. And if you think I'm a quack and you want to listen to your cardiologist, well, that's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings.
Right.
So one last diet thing. How much do you recommend intermittent fasting, and is there a specific patient group that you recommend that for?
Yeah. So I love intermittent fasting, kind of big topic here, but I love intermittent fasting, especially for those people who are trying to get their insulin levels down. So these patients who are insulin resistant or already diabetic, and so I think incorporating some intermittent fasting is great. I think a great way to start out is a 16-8, where you're eating all your calories in an 8-hour period. And so you're fasting for 16 hours. I tell people to stop eating by 7 o'clock at night, which I think everybody should do that anyways. So you allow yourself a 3-hour window before going to bed, and then you skip breakfast. And if you don't eat till lunch, you just went 16 hours. So I think that's a good place to start if they can't start there. And if they're used to eating at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'll say, well, maybe push that back till 10, give your body a break, or, kind of work your way up to it. And then work to where you can go till noon or 1 o'clock. I always say you don't have to do that every day. Maybe do that 2 or 3 days a week. And then once your body gets used to that, then maybe 1 day a week or a couple of times a month, push the envelope a little bit and maybe fast all day. I used to fast every Sunday, and I just would eat Saturday night and then eat again Sunday night. And so it would end up being like 22 hours. And so I think that's great for weight loss. I think it's great for just healing, like a bad gut and different things. It's got a lot of healing properties. All that being said, you really have to individualize that, because obviously if somebody's on insulin, or if they're on, a sulfonylurea, which produces insulin for the listeners, you have to be careful because your blood sugar is going to drop real low. So you really need to, talk to your provider about all that kind of stuff. And then the other thing is you have to, again, it's very individualized, because I was fasting a lot there for a little while, but I'm a very active guy, I'm working out, and I was really feeling like crap. And so I came to the conclusion, well, I'm not getting enough calories. And I just didn't feel good. My libido went in the toilet. And so I was fasting too much. And so, there's too much of a good thing. And then the other kind of complicated thing is women typically respond differently than men, fasting. And so you have to look at that. And so again, it's very individualized, but I think fasting in general is great. But you just kind of have to listen to your body. And I've kind of, for me, for example, I've kind of figured out that I'll do like a 16-hour fast 1 to 2 times a week. I don't really do any prolonged fasting anymore, like 20 hours. I used to do a little bit more than that. I don't really do that anymore. So I'll do it usually about twice a week. And then the other days I'm trying to get my protein in, and those days that I do fast are typically days that I don't work out. So on days that I work out, I'm, piling in the protein, trying to get my protein requirements. But again, I'm not a diabetic. I'm very metabolically healthy. And so somebody that is a diabetic and trying to get their insulin level down, they may want to do it more often. So a lot of variables there, but in general, I do think it's a good thing.
No, I love it. The thing that I find really fascinating about a lot of it is if you look at ancient wisdom, and what I love the concepts of ancient wisdom, because if they still exist 2,000 or 3,000 years, 5,000 years later, there's probably some element of truth to it, or else we would have forgot it, right? And every major world religion has fasting in it. It's there's times of fasting, there's times of feasting, there's this sort of this seasonal kind of aspects to it. And I go, that's really cool. And in Western, our Western society, we've just kind of entirely forgotten about it. I mean, we would have church banquets to raise money. We wouldn't have church fasts, which I was like, isn't that kind of more what was in the Bible? They had banquets, but they also had, if they were really worried about something, they fasted. And so and plus there's just a discipline part of it that's kind of cool. Like to train yourself to know that, what, this thing that you have to do to survive, you
Food
can
doesn't
go
control
without
me.
for a little while and you'll be absolutely just fine.
Well, one thing I would add to that, I read something, it's been a while and I don't remember the exact statistic, but the majority of Americans don't even fast for 12 hours. And that kind of blew my mind. It was a pretty high percentage. And so I think everybody should have at least, should be fasting 12 hours every single day. I mean, and to me, that's easy. That's kind of common sense, but I guess, again, most people aren't doing that. So they're eating right before they go to bed, and then I guess eating again right when they get up in the morning. But even on the days I'm not fasting, I'm still getting 12 hours because my last meal's done by 7 p.m. and then I may eat at 8 a.m., so I'm still going at least 12 hours. And so everybody should do that, in my opinion.
No, they're just getting those sugary Starbucks drinks first thing in the morning and getting that corn syrup flowing through their veins.
It's like friends I had in high school where their parents smoked so much they had to get up in the middle of the night to have cigarettes.
Oh my gosh.
Like, holy moly.
Well, you've got such a wide, vast interest in things that you do in your clinic and on your podcast. We could go on forever, but aside from the big dietary stuff, which we just glossed over, and I know you're big into exercise and fitness, what's the other quickly big, I think, piece of the puzzle in people's wellness and health that they could focus on to make their life better in terms of things that we kind of just, I wouldn't say neglect, but
massive amounts of sex.
Oh, jeez.
Well, that doesn't hurt anything, and we focus on that in our clinic. I mean, we do a lot of sexual wellness, and I do believe that that's important. I would say, which we touched on a little bit, but I would say muscle. I mean, the more I get into this, and I'm always learning with me doing my podcast, I'm always reading books and just, learning and talking to guests. But as I go along in this, I realize, muscle is very important, and especially as we age. And I do believe that, for longevity purposes, muscle is maybe the most, important organ. And so if we can maintain muscle, which can maintain metabolism, I believe it's 80% of our glucose is metabolized by muscles. So if we have muscle there, we're going to be, utilizing that glucose, and we're going to be preventing things like osteoporosis, which, tend to hit women. And so I would, I think we need to focus on muscle, which is a missing piece, even in these people who are doing these diets, whether it's a keto diet or whatever. I mean, you got to do something to build or at least maintain muscle, some type of resistance training, lift. I tell people, if you want to walk every day and move, that's great, but try to lift something heavy, a couple of days a week. And if you can't do that, do some body weight stuff, push-ups, air squats, pull-ups. I mean, just something to work the muscles. So I feel like that's very important.
Totally agree. No, that's a really good point.
Yeah. And that's something, that I neglected because I would run 30, 40 miles a week, but then I'd go windsurfing for 5 hours every weekend. So I just sort of naturally did that.
Well, if you neglect it, you become heavy, and then you're lifting something heavy every day.
Which is your ass. Yeah. So, it really, it's really true. And because I never really liked lifting as much as I liked running, but now that I've got into lifting more, I love it in a different way. Like it's a different kind of buzz. Like it sounds crazy. Like that runner's high is a very different thing than when you finish a muscle, a really good resistance training workout, and your muscles are full of blood, and you're just like it's a different kind of awesome.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And if you can get people to do stuff for a month or 6 weeks, usually they start to see positive benefit, and then you've sunk the hook and you're off to the races. Because once you start seeing the positive benefits, then it's like, holy mackerel, this is awesome.
Yeah, and I get it why it's hard for people, because it's easy to go run. You get yourself a pair of tennis shoes and you just can go out your front door and go running. People don't necessarily have to teach you how to do that. But a lot of people just don't know where to start when it comes to resistance training and lifting. I mean, I've been lifting since high school, and it's just kind of second nature to me. But I forget that it's not for most people, and they don't know what to do when they go to the gym. They don't know what exercises work certain body parts, and so without hiring a trainer, they're kind of lost. And so I get that, but
I just think it's sad that I remember learning that stuff in PE or gym class as a kid, not just the weights, but basic calisthenics like body weight training, push-ups, sit-ups, squats, all that kind of, jumping jacks. We had to do all that stuff all the time, even through high school. And I guess it just kind of gets ingrained that you can do basic stuff like that.
Yeah,
with
no,
body weight.
we need to forget the dodgeball and teach kids,
Yeah.
Early on, very simple
moving.
resistance
Right.
training stuff combined with, some cardio. Like stuff gets so culty in the United States, right? Like, when Kenneth Cooper wrote the, aerobics book, the aerobics revolution, which was in the mid 70s, then everything was running, Jim Fix, the complete book of running and all of these things. It was running and it was aerobics and it was, keep you, you're going to be healthier from a cardiovascular perspective if all you do is cardio. And you look at it and you go, well, actually resistance training still gives you tons of cardio, but it gives you all of these other benefits that you would have never gotten. And it's not that you shouldn't be doing running or hiking or whatever, but you shouldn't be doing what I was doing 25 years ago, which was doing that and nothing else.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a really important kind of exercise theme to leave with people, is that it needs to be well-rounded.
I think we're going to call this episode Eat Muscle, Build Muscle.
There you go.
Basically it in a nutshell.
There you go. Yeah, for sure.
I'm going to call it Love Muscle.
Love the muscle.
Stop it. So, I will link it in the show notes, but why don't you just share with us where people can find you online and your podcast?
Yeah, for sure. So the name of my podcast is FitRx, FITRX, and it's on all the podcast players, Google, Spotify, Apple, all those things. You can find a link to it on my clinic website, which is vibrantlifedc.com. Also, they can find it on just my kind of personal webpage, which is Dr. GregDennis.com. DrGregDennis.com.
That was health.
Perfect.
Health Fix.
What's that?
I missed it. We got a little. I don't know if our software will figure it out. So just the podcast name again. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, FitRx. FITRX.
Yep,
FitRx. Perfect. Yeah,
yes.
and it's awesome.
I've been listening. There's some great topics, and I want to have you back on if you would be so kind to do that, to talk about some other things that you do in wellness in your clinic that are really kind of fun things that we're starting to get into ourselves.
Yeah, we can. He mentioned the sex thing, so we can talk about that more. We can talk about some PRP that we do, and that's always fun to and just enhance that part of people's lives. So yeah,
right,
cool,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, appreciate it.
Okay, well, that was a great show. We covered a lot of ground in a lot of different areas, and I hope it's really kind of whetted the appetites of folks for more specific information. Like if we go into intermittent fasting, we're going to do an episode on counting macronutrients as far as diet, which is May and I are doing it now. It has amazing results, and it's simple in concept, as most things are in life, but more challenging in reality when you actually do it. Right? It's like having kids, right? Like the making the babies kind of fun, the having the babies not so fun, and the raising the kids, well, that never ends.
Yeah, it's fun to actually, listen and hear from more people in medicine that are trained traditionally, that are now exploring and incorporating alternative health measures into their practice. I think there's a lot more of that going on in a blend of them.
I agree. And I hate the word alternative medicine. I don't think there's alternative medicine. I think there's medicine. And I think what we're getting to, like, it either works or it doesn't work. Like, some things never work, right? Like, homeopathy is ridiculous. If you're going to take 1/1000th of a molecule and it's going to do something, I think that's silly. But it's not based on complete
nonsense. It's not traditional surgery or drugs. It's
right. But some of these things, like vitamin infusions, are essentially traditional medicine. They've just been ignored because you can't patent 5 grams of vitamin C in an IV because it's vitamin C. It's a non-patentable substance. And so there's things that we can use in medicine that normally we would not be able to bill for or another company charge for, like really detailed, individualized diet counseling. You can kind of bill for that, but not necessarily. And so, we'd normally pack the patient up, send them off to a nutritionist, and then the nutritionist has just, had lunch with the drug rep for, insulin, and then you wonder why these people get put on like so it's so you gotta break the cycle, and Dr. Dennis is absolutely doing that
because
so
he has control in his practice, which
right,
is what we used to have a long time ago.
Yeah,
we could sit and talk to patients about diet and exercise, and you just bill it as a visit. Nobody cared.
Yep.
Anyway.
All right, but we could rant on, and I shan't
rant no more.
I shan't rant
because we have other good news, which is reaching out for help with your disability insurance from our friend Michael Relvis at MR Insurance. And their goal there is to assist physicians in obtaining the most comprehensive coverage available to fit their unique situation. So reach out for both excellent and quality service at www.mr-disability-insurance.com. As always, I link these in the show notes to make it easier for you so that you can find Michael's page. And on that note, I'm going to go get fit, go work out, get strong, get ripped.
Yes, that's a good idea, because now you have to catch up to me.
Mic drop. All right, everybody. See you next time.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more, and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.